Did you mention where this photo is from?
Haven't yet. I'm about to.
Do you know where it is? Oh, you're about to?
Uh-huh.
Oh, it's part of your thing.
Well, I'm just going to show some pictures at the beginning because I promised I would, and
Oh,
then
right.
they got nothing to do with anything, but I thought it'd be fun. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Temperature? Feel pretty good? Okay. I came back here and pushed some buttons, and I hope I pushed the right ones. Before we start, as promised, I wanted to show you a little some of my New Zealand adventures. So I mentioned when we were together a couple of weeks ago that between Christmas and New Year's, I took off with a bunch of my family, went to New Zealand because my son was getting married there to a young woman from New Zealand. So I've already met her. She's been to stay with us a few times, but got to meet her family and got to do lots of things. My son actually has a New Zealand residency now, so he was really excited to show me sort of his world out there. So just a few highlights here of the proud father of the groom. One of the things he wanted to do was go with me and my daughter and do a hike through up and around and over volcanoes. That includes Mount Doom from the Lord of the Rings. So this is on that hike in the middle of a big red crater. There's the actual. We didn't. This is actually the crater right there from not Mount Doom. This is Mount Doom over here. This is another one. We came up. You sort of walk. Those are actually people there, and you walk all the way down this trail. We were standing up here and I was just thinking, boy, that mountain over there is a funny color. Not realizing that I was actually looking into the crater of a volcano. It was really bizarre. It's me and my daughter Anya right there. Some of you may recognize her. Got it, got to take the ring to Mordor. That's my wedding ring, so I didn't actually throw that in. This is my son. We're doing the Frodo Gollum thing. He's trying to bite the ring off my finger. Is Anya with the flex. Got to do some cultural tourism. This is a Maori cultural heritage place. They invited us onto their place and did a haka for us. If y'all are familiar with a haka and several musical sort of storytelling, some really beautiful aspects of their culture there. And we went to Hobbiton. Some of you know there's a place in the middle of the North Island where they did the filming of both Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, and they've now got it set up as a place you can go walk around and tour. And it's just about as magical as it seems like it would be. There's me doing the Gandalf thing. Be careful not to bump your head. Yeah. Uh-huh. And then time for the wedding. That's both of my children there. That's Lev, the groom, on my left, and Anya, my daughter, on the right. She was sort of in the half best man role. He had a best man, but the best man said he didn't want to do a speech. So my son said to his sister, "You do the best man speech. You don't get to say no." Bride and bride's mother. That's Mia is her name. Most Instagrammable wedding I'll ever go to. It was Instagram ready from the beginning. Those are my parents right there. Some of you have met them. Tears at the vows. Right? It is Instagram ready from the beginning. Look at that. We're doing pictures, Robbie. My big family. Best man speech. Toast with the actual best man. This is his friend Chandler, who they first met when they were 6, when we first moved to Austin. They've been best friends ever since. You can barely see the bride, but that's her over there making a reach. That's pretty much the whole country as far as I could tell. In traditional Korean wedding in sort of formal wear. One of many costume changes that happened through the weekend. And then afterwards, family soccer game. Probably whichever team Anya's boyfriend was on, because he's a big soccer guy from Leeds, England. I play soccer like an American football player. Have to remember not to knock people down. Yeah, me too. It's how I play everything. Ping pong, fly fishing. And I found the ancient moa that went extinct. 1,000 years ago, I think. Anyway, just wanted to show those about my adventures down under. Thanks for indulging me in that. Yeah.
Where do you do a honeymoon if your wedding is in New
Yeah,
Zealand?
right. I'm not sure where you do a honeymoon if you're Lev, my son, because sort of you've been everywhere. But the answer was beaches in the Philippines, and then as of today, 6 weeks in Japan. So landed in Tokyo today, and I think honeymoon was the Philippines experience. Now they're just going to live in Japan for a while, because that's what they do. We can be done with that, as far as I'm concerned. I'm done showing slides. What's that?
However Lev's doing life, he's doing it right.
He's doing it right. That's what I keep telling him. Well, okay. We're not here to talk about New Zealand. But to carry on with our conversation about discipleship, following in former Archbishop Rowan Williams, his book, Being Disciples, which some of you are, hey, good morning, folks. Which some of you are reading along, and if you're not, that's fine, because we're doing some reading and discussing in here. Themes for today are about our forgiveness and holiness. Some of you continue to read along? Not in this group, okay.
They're all the women's retreat, I think.
Oh, they're all, that's right. I was like, wait, we're missing some people. Right. Yeah. Corey, I've been leaning on Corey these last few weeks. But before we dive into this material, it's been 2 weeks ago. Lots happened in 2 weeks. But I left you with a couple of questions, and I said just think on these if the opportunity comes, or if you haven't, we can still talk about them now. We talked about faith, hope, and love. Were the big were the themes from last week? Is sort of the character traits or the virtues that center a Christian life. And you may remember we talked about kind of mapping those on to memory, understanding, and will. If that sounds familiar, I talked a little bit about John of the Cross, and Rowan Williams' sense that part of the life of faith is trusting that there is one who is loving us, caring for us, remembering us, knowing us, despite everything, despite what we feel. We can always know that there's one who's a trustworthy God who's there loving us and attending to our lives. So a couple of reflection questions that he suggests at the end. How have you coped with periods of dryness, frustration, or emptiness in your life as a believer? And then in what ways can churches help people resist a consumer mentality in their approach to faith as well as their approach to other areas of life? How do churches sometimes encourage such a mentality? So big questions. Let's see if anything comes to mind as you think about those. Starting with that first one, have you coped with periods of dryness, frustration, or emptiness in your life as a believer? Maybe a bit spotlighty, maybe a bit personal, but if anybody feels like sharing anything about how you've coped with periods of dryness, frustration, and emptiness, what do you think others might benefit from hearing? Anything come to mind there?
Cry a lot,
Tears.
do a lot of crying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, what's been most helpful is community. People
Yeah.
who understand what I'm going through, and people who maybe aren't in that position to, help me see the stream of light.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe that one, Jaden, links up with the second question. What are ways that churches can support each other through those times? So when you've, are there ways that this community you think can be there for one another in intentional ways when we're in those periods of dryness? Anything come to mind about that? Just like how we can show up for each other?
Yeah, I think what comes to mind is slowing down.
Yeah.
I think especially in our society, it's very
Oh,
fast
right.
paced.
Sorry.
I was just
I'm asking people questions and
Oh.
not doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Hello, am I?
You're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think slowing down makes a big difference so that people can get to the real conversations that are often overlooked or take a little longer to get to.
Yeah.
And so being able to slow down.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Like maybe when we see each other, not be in a hurry to move on, and maybe even in the limited time we have together to try to have some real conversations. Maybe that can be on a Sunday morning. Maybe that can be at retreats or at other gatherings like the Bible studies or prayer breakfasts or something. To have some real conversations that check in with each other like that. What else comes to mind? Either about how you've coped or about what the church can do to support. Yeah, Richard.
For me, it's prayer,
Yeah.
especially laying on of hands. When people gather around you, put their hand on you, and pray for you. For me, that's very uplifting and encouraging.
Yeah. Yeah. You actually physically feel the connection with the people around you. Yeah. Thanks, James.
I think for me it's the routine of every Sunday you're at church, and I think especially this Miles mentioned it briefly in the sermon. This past week when we was at home for like 3.5 days without leaving the house, it reminded me of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I remember from COVID times is how every day was the same. And then Sunday come and you would get to log into church and you get to watch church on Zoom, and just the routine of knowing that that's coming in 3 days and 2 days and 1 day, just and kind of when all the days blended together, there was that difference was being able to have that routine of, and even then it wasn't the same as joining the community here in person, but that routine of knowing what's coming. And I think when you're in a dry spot in your life of faith, just even if you don't feel like it, just showing up. Even if you're in a bad mood, showing up helps.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have two things I do. One is just to walk, to be outside. It's just amazing how being outside can change my whole perspective. And the other is what you said too, reach out to my friends, spiritual friends that will pray for me, as Richard said, or just knowing that they care makes a huge difference. And our prayer list at church, being able to put someone's name on the prayer list and know the whole congregation is praying for us is very powerful.
Yeah. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, I think for me it's just
reminding myself that sometimes you do just have to kind of muddle through things, right? You just kind of got to keep walking through life. It almost, fake it to make it, but I don't like that phrase. But you just kind of got to muddle through sometimes, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And reminding yourself that that's okay is helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that helps. We don't have to dwell much on that second part of his question about consumer mentality, but I see kind of a connection to what y'all are saying is there's a kind of temptation of instant gratification maybe that we can feel in our spiritual lives, can feel in the church life. Like, I got to show up, and if I don't feel it right away, then I got to go somewhere else, or I'm doing the wrong thing, or I'm checking out of this faith, or whatever. And there's something beautiful about the kind of invitation to slow down and be a place where we don't have to feel it all the time, and we can support one another. And if you and I are having one of those real conversations, and I'm able to say, hey, it's been a dry patch, and I'm having trouble, trusting in all of this stuff, and maybe you're just gonna say, yeah, me too, and maybe that's the support I need, or maybe you can say, I spent a good bit of time there as well. Let me know if you want to have some conversations, or what kind of support you need. Instead of like, oh, let's fix that. Let's get on to the good stuff. Let's all feel happy about this religion. That's not real, Sometimes it is, but forcing ourselves to always kind of get that dopamine hit from religion maybe isn't quite the kind of church that I want to be part of. And I'm kind of hearing that from you all as well. Let's move into the parts for today. And what I want to do is what Demi did the first time, and what I did a couple weeks ago, which is just give a little introduction, and then I'll pass some readings around and have you group up. I got three different readings I want to look at, so I'll just kind of throw papers and let y'all figure out what group you're going to be in. It'll work out like magic, like it did last time. But I want to say, I think that what I want to say to introduce the readings for this time has to do with really why this seemed to me, as I heard from others, from the staff and in the spiritual formation committee, the about what to do with our Epiphany series. Just a kind of a deep study in what discipleship looks like. This is, Miles referenced a little bit in his sermon about just a difficult time in the world, a difficult time in America, a difficult time to be for people of faith, in all sorts of ways. And it can feel, this is just me. This is me talking. It can feel to me like there's a sort of something I ought to be doing. And I think that is true, but I think just for the way I operate, before I can discern what do I need to be doing, publicly saying, or what groups do I join, what invitations do I respond to, what demonstrations do I go to, and all of this. First, I need to do some reflection on a kind of being question. Who am I? And how can I kind of center myself in an understanding of who I am? And for me, that means who I am as a disciple of Christ. That question is foundational for me. And then as I get some clarity, remind myself of that. Then those questions about what can I do begin to kind of fall in line, begin to fall like, oh, this one, not that one, I can't do this one, but this one seems appropriate. This seems like a good time for us as a church to reflect a bit, not maybe immediately on what should we be doing, because that is happening and that's coming, and that's a lot of us will make different kinds of discernments about that. Here's a thing that I can do. I wouldn't do that thing, but I might do this thing. But first, some conversation together about just the being stuff. Who are we? what does it mean to be a community of disciples? What are the practices, what are the characteristics of that life that we can reflect on together, remind ourselves of, that then might give us some clarity on, okay, well, what is this moment in the places and times that we exist? What's it calling for? So the two, we really get a kind of foundational Christian practice in the next chapter of the book, on forgiveness, and then really a kind of foundational Christian character. And we're going to do 2 chapters together today. We'll take a couple of readings from 2 chapters. So chapter 3 is about forgiveness. Chapter 4 is about holiness. Forgiveness as that foundational Christian practice, and holiness really is a way he describes the Christian life. And you might think sort of the Book of Acts. The Book of Acts is this book that comes right after the Gospels in our New Testament, and it's sort of, here's the life of Jesus, and we've had the whole story of the life of Jesus, and then he ascends and goes into heaven. And then the question is, what kind of people follow that Jesus? What does it mean to be a community of disciples? And this is like the whole question. And they start these practices, and they start doing these things together, and gathering, and the way they care for each other. And one of the things that they do is they begin to practice generosity with each other. And it's economic generosity, but it's also generosity around practices like forgiveness. How do we become a people who practice Jesus' forgiveness to us by forgiving one another, by asking forgiveness when we hurt one another? And one of the things that he does here in this reading is he suggests that there's something about that practice of forgiveness in a Christian community, in which we learn to be comfortable being on both sides of the exchange of forgiveness. And both of those, like being forgiven by someone and forgiving someone, both of those call for something kind of deep, and they call for a vulnerability. They call for a graciousness. They're both really uncomfortable. I don't like saying to somebody, well, I forgive you. That feels sort of big and loaded and dramatic. And I don't really like when somebody says it to me either, because I'd like to be like, hold on. Or what did I do that you need to forgive me? But entering into those spaces where we learned, where we can even sort of adjust to that vocabulary, can become a way of saying, okay, we're a different kind of people. We don't have to have it all together. And if you don't have it all together, and you're not having it all together harms me in some way, I can forgive you for that. And you're going to expect the same from me. I'm going to not show up for you in some way that in my better days I would. That doesn't have to break our relationship. You don't have to say, oh, unsafe person. No, there are patterns. And if I do that over and over again, you get to say, yeah, I'm going to get some distance here. But if I can acknowledge that, look at that, and come to you, in the best moments, a Christian community can be a place where I can just say, hey, can you forgive me for that? And can we move forward? There's something deep and sort of transcendent that can happen in a community when we can let our guard down and be vulnerable in that sorts of ways. So that's the first thing that he begins to talk about. And we're going to have a couple of readings, that come from that chapter. And then the second chapter, he begins to talk about holiness. And there's some beautiful and kind of funny ways that he talks about holiness. And I'll just introduce that briefly. He says, one of the things that may surprise us about holiness in the Bible is that holiness isn't about kind of austerity. It's not about sort of being way out there, isolated on a hill and glowing or something. But in the Bible, holiness becomes more like going into difficult places, a sort of trust in God that allows us to go into difficult places. So he talks about how when Jesus prays that his followers will become holy, what he's saying is that they'll become like me, and they'll become vulnerable again. They'll have the courage and risk about maybe some of the work that Richard has done for years and years, going into conversations with people who've had hard lives and are incarcerated. This is what biblical holiness looks like, not so much like being completely separate and isolated. I had a theology professor many years ago when I was just beginning grad school, who talked about the word spirited, spiritual and spirited. He said, if you want to know about what it looks like to become holy, to receive the Holy Spirit, because here's a contrast for you. Think about your stereotype of a spiritual grandmother. Now think about your stereotype of a spirited horse. He said, to have the Holy Spirit in the New Testament is more like the second than it is like the first. Which, not to say that grandmothers can't be filled with the Spirit. Both of mine were, I trust. But the idea is that this is something that we'll see that Rowan Williams is getting at, and saying that to take on a life of holiness is to be filled with life, filled with energy, to sort of this generosity that sort of makes people want some of that too, to want to share in the life and the love and the vitality that sort of floods through you, which is why in the New Testament when people get the Holy Spirit, they do wild things. They don't just go be real quiet somewhere. They're surprising people with their sort of their engagement out in public. All right, let's take a look at a few passages here. Get y'all reading and get me stopped talking. This is we're going to have a group 1. There's a few there, and you're going to kind of collect here, and you're going to talk about one of the forgiveness passages, and you all are going to also talk about a forgiveness passage. You're going to be group 2, so a few people collect up here.
All right, group 1.
Thank you.
Whoever's coming over
See,
here.
look at the magic happening. I knew. We're going to do a group 3 over here. And let's see, let's have a group 4 meet back here. You'll see I've marked them there, so if you see a number on your paper that isn't your number, don't read that part.
So one reads one.
One reads 1. And you are group 2, so you start down at the 2. That's good. We finally got started this week. gather the ideas back.
She could come in here, or she could do really.
The very first. Okay. All right. Well, tell us what you noticed in the passage that you read.
Well, we were saying a lot about these two words on the second page, second paragraph down. Dignity is essentially and primarily given in our creation. We were saying a lot about the importance of those two words.
What two words now? Dignity?
Essentially and primarily.
Essentially and primarily.
Yeah, you were saying that the daily bread is essential and primary. And also stood out to us that it starts on the first page but continues to the second. The prayer both challenges the arrogance of those who think they are not in need and establishes that the needy are fully possessed of a treasure that needs to be uncovered and released, the humanity that draws them into mutual relation. And then the last thing was, what did you say? Oh, yes. Part of what we're praying for in these words is the grace to receive our own humanity as a gift. And Kevin was saying humanity as in our own failings.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But having, I guess, the power to forgive oneself as well as ask for forgiveness, and to be able to, I guess, the vulnerability that comes with both of those things, being on the receiving end and the giving end, because it takes a lot of courage, I guess, to ask for forgiveness. But I mean, it feels like you're putting a lot on that person to forgive you, but it's also putting a lot on yourself to get up to asking for that forgiveness.
Yeah. Yeah, so again, that sort of vulnerability brings us into a new space. And I love that idea that whichever end, whether we're receiving or giving the forgiveness, we're receiving our own humanity as a gift. And that sort of defendedness, I heard y'all talking about a kind of defendedness, like a liturgy that reminds us that we are given as gifts from God, takes us out of this mindset of I have to be defended and self-reliant and show up as someone who has it all together and carry myself in this space as if everyone else ought to have it all together around me. If we all receive who we are and what we are as gifts, then that just sort of changes kind of what it means to be human. How about this second group? What did y'all notice?
I'll break the ice. To me, one of those things that struck me a lot was, on the forgiveness, giving it and receiving it. But the underlying point is the relationship is important. It's worth working for. It's worth giving forgiveness. It's worth receiving forgiveness. And that struck me as something I agree. relationships are worth working for, I think.
I
I
like
don't know
that,
if anybody else wants to, you had a lot
Yeah.
of good points to, yeah, go ahead.
We also talked about the complexity of forgiveness and how oftentimes we know that in forgiveness it can deepen relationships, and then oftentimes it's not safe to forgive. And so noticing what does forgiveness look like when there's trauma? What is forgiveness? So noticing that it can get complex, but with that said, when relationships are in a place where it feels mutual, it can feel vigoring and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So practice. What does it mean to be practice this call to vulnerability, to working towards the gift of relationships, and also practice a sort of practice an awareness together that forgiveness is not always within reach and not always the healthiest option, or at least sort of acting in a way that is intentionally trying to restore a relationship isn't always the healthiest option. It often is, but not always is. And so a healthy community needs those sorts of, it needs that kind of wisdom where you can discern, can I practice a forgiveness here? We're talking about things like abusive relationships. What does it mean to practice forgiveness, to receive my humanity as a gift, to all the gifts that we're talking about that sort of remind us who we are as humans, but also keep ourselves safe from someone who's not entering into that sort of transformative kind of vulnerable space with us. These are deeply Christian questions, I think. How do we keep, if someone is not willing to engage in that kind of practice, how do I not let that keep me out of the kind of community and the kind of person, the kind of community I want to be in and the kind of way I want to participate in that? Anything else come out of your conversations here? Before we move on to the others, is this anything that I wrote up here, you heard, or you're thinking now that you want to note or share? Either one of these other, yeah.
So is it our decision whether or not the relationship is worth it?
Say it one more time.
Is it our decision whether or not the decision's worth it?
You mean in these hard moments when
Yeah.
we're trying to discern, do I
Forgive or
repair? Do I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you end a relationship that's abusive,
Is
why
that
should I forgive that person if I just ended the relationship? Why?
why to which part? Why in the relationship? Why practice? Why
If
seek
the person
forgiveness?
is not, if the person has gone off the edge
Uh-huh.
and they're abusive to you, and you end that relationship, why should I forgive that person?
There is one other thing.
Bring it. Let's get a mic up here so they can hear it on the recording.
Right behind you.
Thank you, Bram.
There is one other thing that we talked about that is on that, and you have to. I think you do have to separate the two, forgiveness from the relationship. Now,
That's good. That's good.
Nan said somebody at some point in her life told her, what was it? The contents of the vessel can destroy the vessel.
The bitterness.
The bitterness, yeah. So if you do need to
Ooh, that's
maybe
good.
forgive, and not carry that with you, because that can do a lot of harm to you. But it doesn't mean you have to have a relationship. And I think it's separating those two is an important point, because you don't want to carry all that stuff around.
So I heard two questions. I heard, is it my call whether I seek forgiveness for someone I've stepped out of a relationship with, and then also what might motivate me to seek forgiveness for someone I've stepped out of a relationship with. And I love that idea that that in the best cases, this exchange of forgiveness does help restore relationships. In these other cases, you give up on the relationship for really good, well-discerned, carefully discerned reasons. And I think that probably should involve a therapist, maybe a spiritual director, pastor, help discern friends who can help discern that with you. But if it comes to a place of this relationship needs to end, then what I'm hearing is forgiveness looks different, but it's still something to aspire to, because it becomes not about restoring that relationship, but about restoring your own humanity, your own sense of yourself as a gift of God, and somebody who's can live a life of can live a practice of vulnerability, can live into that grace. So I think for all those reasons, it becomes an important next discernment. How do I practice forgiveness when it's not going to help restore that particular relationship? What else can it do? Yeah, Nan.
So this episode, really one of the most painful in my life, because the church was involved in really hurting my husband. And we moved away from that situation. And I was in Atlanta as a priest in the church. Lent comes around and I'm thinking, okay, I really need to forgive those people. So, but I really wasn't interested in restoring the relationship. But for my own sake, I knew I needed to. So at first, I wrote a letter as part of my Lenten discipline that I didn't mail that was, I forgive you, but you did this, blah, blah, blah. And I realized
Step one,
that
right?
was not forgiveness, so tear that up. Couldn't do anything. Lent 2 comes around, wrote another letter. I mean, it was the third year before I was able to write them and say, I forgive you, I wish the best for you and your family. I never heard from either of these people
And you
again.
sent the third one.
No.
You didn't send any of them.
I sent the third one.
You sent the third one, yeah.
It was a clean forgiveness.
Wow.
It took me 3 years. And never heard from them. But I felt so freed from that bitterness. And I think there is a restoring a relationship, but it's maybe between me and God.
Yeah.
That was restored a little bit.
Yeah. Ooh. The bitterness in the vessel. That's good. Yeah. Really good.
I was just going to say that I don't think forgiveness is immediate. I think sometimes it's a lifelong thing. I mean, I wouldn't say that I am that old. I don't have that much life experience. But in terms of, distancing yourself from relationships that don't benefit you and forgiveness is not synonymous. And also it takes a long time sometimes, because especially even if you haven't had a relationship with a person that you had to distance yourself from in forever, in a long time, you'll find yourself thinking in certain pathways or doing certain things that you think, why do I think that about myself? And it's like, because of that one person. So it'll come up when you least expect it, and you'll have to kind of face that forgiveness like multiple times sometimes.
Ooh, that's good.
Because it comes up when you least expect it, and you think, I thought I was done with that, but sometimes you're not. And then it just takes time, and especially, more life experience and more time to kind of see that this person was not in a position to be a good relationship for you, to kind of see, maybe at the beginning you say, why do they do that? I can't believe they would do that to me. But then I guess later on, maybe it's sort of a more clarity. And sometimes you need that distance to have that clarity.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such good stuff.
I just want to add on to that too, that I completely agree with that. And the forgiveness too, in my mind, forgiveness doesn't mean restoring a relationship.
Yeah, that's important.
Forgiving a person for doing harmful things to you could be a reflection of, I see that person grew up badly, or was harmed growing up, or they're in a bad place, and it came out at me. I forgive that person.
Yeah.
I mean, it still hurts, but there's it's more holistic than I want to restore that relationship, because that could be the worst thing to do.
Yeah. Sometimes finding that empathy is the path forward, even if it doesn't end in that restored relationship. Let's talk about there's some really good stuff in the second chapter. I don't want to, we don't have a lot of time for it, but I don't want to skip right over it. So group 3, what did you notice in your reflection on holiness?
Well, Teresa
three sentences kind of stood out to our
Okay.
group. In the first paragraph, it says, God is big enough to deal with and work with actual compromised and imperfect people.
Ah.
And then further down, when talking about different people who are full of the holiness and the Spirit and how they interact in the world, it was here, right, where basically describing kind of Desmond Tutu and people like him who have these large personas and egos, but they not only, where is it? Oh, there's that one. There it is. I can't find it still. I'll follow your finger. That they are so in love with themselves that they make it possible for everyone else to be in love with themselves. not in love with the person, but in love with their own self that's in the room. So everyone can find place and grace within that person and in their presence. And then down at the bottom, a holy person makes you see things in yourself and around you that you may not have seen before. That is to say that the world enlarges rather than shrinking.
Yeah.
And so taking those three things and bringing them together about how the Spirit can then open our eyes and expand our own experiences, no matter what they are,
Yeah.
and bring us further into the world to affect others as well as ourselves.
Read the last line of that paragraph about where he's talking about Desmond Tutu.
The last line, the effect one line. Which one do you want? I don't know. I'm not.
That is not. Here you go. Your turn.
Oh, yeah.
You have a mic on your.
Oh, yeah, I have one. Thank you. By God's infinite grace, it makes me feel that just possible, being around Desmond Tutu for him, he says, being around Desmond Tutu makes me feel that just possibly by God's infinite grace, I could one day love being Rowan Williams in the way that Desmond Tutu loves being Desmond Tutu. Love that, love that. And I love that idea of what a saint is. You know, what if St. Julian's was a place where we came and found people who just loved the gift that God had given the world that was themselves so much. Not in the, he says there's maybe two kinds of egotists. There's those who are so into themselves that they can't actually engage with others around them, can't practice empathy, can't see the world through anyone else's eyes. And then there are people like Desmond Tutu, who just fill you with a sense of, oh, that's the kind of sort of enjoyment of being the gift that you are that's possible. Maybe that could be possible for me too. I love that. How about group 4?
We spoke about, or we read about holiness. The path to holiness starts with two things: looking and exploring. Looking at Jesus, looking at what God is like, looking at the gospel and all that means, and exploring where human beings are, what their needs are, what they are calling us to do, how we may help them more human, how we may help make them more human. And to be holy is to look for holiness in others.
Mm-hmm.
And this means that a really holy person is someone like a great artist or musician or poet. They help us to see what we would otherwise miss, dimensions and depths in the world that we may not otherwise spot.
Yeah, yeah. Any other reflections on that bit of reading from your group? Sometimes Rowan Williams' words themselves are enough. That's the reflection itself. Any other final thoughts from anyone? pass it over.
The Japanese animator Hayao Miyazaki does all the Ghibli films. He's got a really clear idea of what, true love is like, and he says that it's two people inspiring each other to live, to keep living.
Wow.
So that's what made me think of to see the humanity in other people. It's not so much like seeing this person as a god or as a, worship, but like, you make me want to be alive.
That's so good. That's so good. Nan. Nan's ready.
Nan's ready?
Final thought, Nan. Then it's time to go to church.
I wanted to circle back to what you started with about what we're called to do, and beginning with listening to who we are, figuring out who we are. I just got back from a conference with Diana Butler Bass, and it was called Wisdom from the Margins. And we heard from Jamar Tisby, this African-American powerhouse of a preacher who's written a book called Spirit is Justice. And he said, when he got to the what do we do now, said, look at what your spiritual gifts are and start with that and do what are your God-given gifts. So they'll be all different, like you said, but kind of paying attention and starting with what's natural for us, what we're gifted at, and exercise our Christian action in that way.
Thank you all for the conversation. I forgot to start with prayer, so let me end with one. Thank you, God, for this time that you've given us to gather in this place, to worship and then to reflect together on what the life of discipleship, of calling us to who we are, and then inviting us into acts out in the world. Thank you for giving us this time to reflect on what that is and what we can be for one another in this place. Pray that you would give us grace as we go throughout our day and our week. Bless the women who are on their retreat and the rest of the community and the world around us you've called us to serve. In Christ's name.